Hi, Nick Stewart here. And in this case study, we're going to look at a case of mine recently, or an inquiry from a client in relation to selling his business and then tax planning post-sale, and how to prepare not just prepare his business and do the deal structure for his sale of his business, but thinking about how and where he wanted to be after the sale, and what his tax position would be, etc., etc. Very interesting, this one. So let's get into the meat of the detail and watch the video. So this particular case was actually very interesting. About a couple of weeks ago, I got contacted by an owner of a specialized law firm, shall we say, and they actually hadn't been thinking about selling their business, but they actually got approached to have their business bought, and they were looking at how to set up the best tax effective deal structure for selling the business, and their processes afterwards, their tax processes afterwards. Okay, and it was quite interesting how the conversation evolved. So initially, the first part of the conversation was about whether they should structure the deal as an asset sale or more of a typical M&M as a going concern, as to what would actually make more sense, i.e., did somebody just want to take their client book and their clients and add it to their existing business, or did they want to keep the existing business going as a going concern and make a group of that within that? And the people that he was talking to, maybe an asset sale would lead best. And how was the most tax effective way to dispose of the sale? So we had a conversation on that particular part for a little while. And then we started to discuss about, this was a relatively large amount of money. This would definitely, if the person wasn't already a high net worth individual before the sale, he certainly was going to be after the sale. So we discussed about, because this sale was not necessarily going to happen tomorrow morning, it could be happening in a year to 2 years' time. He was in a position to plan where he wanted to be, right? So one of the questions is, where do you envisage yourself living outside of the UK, and whereabouts, would you like to live? And we had a conversation about that. And obviously each individual's, I think Spain was on the agenda, Malta was on the agenda, Italy was on the agenda. And it was a question of what he really wanted. I basically said, don't go to Spain unless you really have to, right? Unless it's where you really want to live, because there are much more tax effective places like where I live in Portugal or Cyprus or whatever. But you obviously have to be happy where you're living and where you're located. And we had that sort of conversation. Then the conversation went over to tax structures, about putting the money, in essence, setting up an offshore company to receive the money, and at that point, not being tax resident in the United Kingdom, where this business is based. And I basically explained, by all means, you can go to the Caribbean, you can go to Hong Kong, you can go to the tax-free zones in Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. No problem. You can set up a company, basically, and the company's going to pay next to zero tax. However, in essence, that in itself doesn't really matter. It's actually where you are tax resident that matters. Okay, so at the end of the day, look at it this way: you can have your money in a company in the Cayman Islands, for example. The minute you take that money out of the Cayman Islands and you're a tax resident of the United Kingdom, you will pay basically up to 46% tax, because you're likely to be a high rate tax on that money that you pull out, right? So if you want to buy a nice house, a nice Ferrari, whatever it happens to be, you will end up having to pay, pay tax at wherever you are. Now, if you're in a jurisdiction which has 0% tax, then you'll pay 0% tax on your money. So it's where you're tax resident. And we had a long conversation about that. And it was quite interesting for a professional person that I was actually giving the professional advice. And I'm not a tax expert, so I just know this from all the businesses I've done all over the world. But in my network, I have probably the best tax advisors in the world. And that's what I do with people. I sort of connect people where they need to go to get the information that they need to get. And that was really in itself a really interesting conversation. And then I actually sort of said, what about you and the family? What do you and the family want to do? And I said, that's probably a very important conversation to have with your wife as to really where you want to be and what you want to do. And then actually the question that should have come out at the beginning sort of came out towards the end about his family and what his family wanted to do. And in essence, I think he had 4 kids that were all grown up, were all sort of 20 plus. But they had one kid late in life who was about 7. And really, so I said, what do you want to do about the kid's schooling? Where is the kid going to go to school? Because wherever the kid goes to school, that's where you're going to be tax resident. You're going to spend more than 180 days a year wherever that kid goes to school. I guess you have homeschooling and things like that, but generally speaking, wherever the kid goes to school is where you are going to be tax resident. And you really have to come full circle to that question first, really. Where do you want to live and where are your kids going to go to school? If you don't have kids who've grown up, you're in a much better position than you were before. And it was it was really interesting. It's one of my more interesting conversations, because at the end of the day, it took me back to actually selling lifestyle real estate. Selling a €5 million villa in Marbella, for example, in that actually you can do all the tax planning. You can have Gibraltar companies doing this. You can have Delaware companies doing that. But, if you're going to spend more than 182 days in one particular country, then you're going to be based tax resident of that country, and there's no avoided. Now, also, please, if you're an American viewer to this, disregard this completely, because in America, you can't just leave a country and not pay and not be no longer in the US system. The US system gives you a relatively healthy allowance. I don't know the exact amount, but I think it's around $110,000 before you pay tax when you leave the United States. But I'm not an expert, and I would suggest you speak to an American lawyer, an American tax advisor. Again, I have the very best in my own network, which I would be happy to introduce you to. But anyway, that was the case study. And the moral of the story is actually doesn't matter how much money you have. Let's say, I should say that, I'm afraid. Once you have enough money to consider living outside of the country, the UK, then it doesn't matter how much money you have. Kids are going to get you, lifestyle's going to get you, and it has to be so. If you choose to live outside the United Kingdom or the United States for tax reasons, you have to find somewhere that you're happy with, right? And for my instance, I love Portugal. It's actually why I chose Portugal over Cyprus. Cyprus was probably more tax effective, but I chose Portugal. Anyway, that's the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the video channel and hit the notification bell so you can get more videos like this.
Thanks for watching the video, and please feel free to connect with me on my personal website, nickstewart.co. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Bye for now.